Hi, welcome to the Semiotic Eye, a podcast where you get to learn about all things semiotics. The following episodes will include conversations between Hamsini Shivkumar, India's leading semiotician and founder of Leapfrog Strategy Consulting, and Anurag Wesh, the founder of Mensa, a social media platform for audio sharing. The live audience listening to the conversations were allowed to interject and ask questions. Unfortunately, you won't be able to do the same here. However, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us on Leapfrog Strategy Consulting on LinkedIn. We hope this podcast is insightful to you and deepens your understanding of semiotics.
Let's get started.
Yes.
Right. So, again, Hamsini, absolute pleasure to have you in Mensa as one of the channel hosts in this behavioral sciences learning community. Right. We want to build a community which is a little more practice oriented rather than the whole space of pop culture sciences that we see. And I don't think we could have found a better person than you to talk about semiotics. I mean, everybody, I think, in the world knows how much you know about semiotics, but I think we get to learn today, not just know that you know semiotics, right? So, really happy to have you here. Your network is going weak and not so weak every now and then, but I'll let you know if your network seems weak.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Hamsini. You want to introduce the topic and the channel, and then we can go on and
I'm Hanurag. I'm super delighted to be, part of Mensa and then start this learning channel on semiotics. So the way I've thought about it is because we have 52 weeks, I'll start with some orientation, not on theory, but just to set the context of understanding what is semiotics, and then go into the link or connections between semiotics and behavioral science, semiotics and marketing, branding, advertising, and so on and so on. So I'll go into the more applied parts after maybe the first 3 sessions, but I think the first 3 sessions might be, or 2 or 3 sessions might be required to just get a better understanding of what the domain actually, or the discipline or domain actually focuses on and covers. We are creators and users of semiotics in our everyday life. We all carry a mental encyclopedia of words and images, sounds and smells. We carry it in our long-term memory and we use it all the time to make sense, that is to figure out what is happening, and to make meaning, which is, okay, how do I interpret what is happening? And for that act of interpretation, uses different kinds of reasoning processes. If you are very scientifically trained, you might use a lot of causal reasoning. But if you are not that scientifically trained, as most people are not, then you probably do some kind of connective reasoning, abductive reasoning to figure out actually what is going on and what something really means. And if you are not able to connect what you are seeing with some other concept and then put it together to make meaning, chances are that you're going to feel very lost, very disconnected from people around you, from the world around you, from events and developments that happen around you. In fact, studies with people who have gone through trauma, psychological studies, one of the big findings is that their brain or their mind is stuck at the point when the trauma occurred and they are not able to make fresh interpretations and fresh meanings of whatever they are encountering. The mind basically takes them back to that same point where they are stuck. So the inability to interpret and make fresh meaning is actually a deterrent to their emotional health and well-being. So, as I said, we all have a common sense way because we are taught from childhood. We wouldn't be able to live in our environment if we were not taught and we didn't learn. But also we have a capacity to unlearn and relearn as well. So then why do you need expert semioticians? Or maybe I should go to another point.
Hamsini, I have a quick question here, right? So,
Yes.
So when we talk about semiotics, right, we are only talking about man-made symbols and icons, right? Anything that's not man-made, it might be in your visual field and everything else, like a sketch of a animal or something. That's not what we are referring to when we're talking semiotics, right? It's all man-made symbols and icons. Is that right or wrong?
No, that's not true. Everything communicates or everything signifies, actually, as semioticians say. And actually, I'm only talking about human semiotics, but there are studies and there are people who study animal behavior, animal signs and sounds. They even study plants. They study this sort of meaning making or this signification at a cellular level, even asking questions like how does the cell read, like if some stimulus, something happens in it, like a virus enters your body and the cell then has to differentiate between this is a virus and a foreign body and this is not. How is that cell programmed to do that sort of interpretation? I don't know anything about it, but there is biosemiotics is a huge area that looks at plants, that looks at animal zoology, ethology, all kinds of things. So the biosemioticians would say that actually the semiotic capacity is it's like a life capacity. Only no inanimate objects can interpret, but all of living beings have a semiotic capacity.
So it's not even perceptual, right? It's even beyond perceptual senses, right? So it's not just sensory stimuli that we can perceive with our five senses, right? It could be way beyond. When you talk about biosemiotics and all at a cell level, that's not sensory stimuli, right? The way we know.
Yeah. Yes, that is true. So the field is vast. There are many people who study many sort of domains. The biosemioticians' consensus is that semiotics is life. That is the capacity to interpret or connect in a way to say that, okay, this means this and this means that. That capacity exists even at a cellular level. Of course, it becomes the systems, science systems and ability to interpret become increasingly sophisticated when you come into man-made cultural systems and symbols and all that. They become infinitely more complex, and sophisticated. Apart from the cellular level, at a human level, actually, at that capacity. So what semiotics actually looks at is representation, how something stands for something else. And that in that capacity, at least at a human level, there is a strong role for human imagination. And that capacity is visible even in children as young as, let's say, 2.5 to 3. That capacity for imaginative play comes. So if you have seen children at that age group, you can play with them saying, okay, now daddy is a horse and you are riding the horse. Now the child knows that actually for daddy is not the horse, but for the purposes of the game or play. Okay, so I'm going to start with a couple of questions. So saying, okay, if you find yourself in a new airport in a city for the first time, how do you really navigate your way around that airport? Yeah, so obviously you're looking around and looking for the signs to tell you, okay, turn left and turn right, this is here, that is there. You want to use the washroom, it's there, and so on and so on. So that's one kind of sign reading that we all learn in order to navigate our way. But another example is, let's say you want to have some tea and there are 3 different kind of containers in front of you. Let's say you see a bone china cup, a kulhad, a paper cup as possible containers for tea. But when you see these, each of them will speak to you, right? You know what to do with each of those cups, and you will not drink from tea from the 3 different cups in quite the same way. And after you've drunk your tea, how you deal with the cup will also be different. Nobody gave you an instruction manual to read, and yet you are able to figure it out. And so like this, there are so many examples in our everyday life about what products, let's say a big fat pickup truck, American style, what it represents, what it stands for as a sign. Or, in Tamil Nadu, all the fans of movie stars build these towering cutouts of the star. So that's another kind of cultural symbol that they create and so on. So we are reading and interpreting signs and symbols to make sense or meaning of the world around us. Right? So we think in signs and symbols because language itself is a very sophisticated and complex system of signs. And the scripts in which the languages are written are symbol systems, because the same language can be written in different scripts. As we know, when we try to write Hindi, not in the Devanagari script, but in the Roman script. So every human child born is actually taught languages to speak and think in, right? And it's also acculturated to become a member of the culture and community. So they are taught the right way to greet others, how to speak to various groups of people. And they are also through language trained to interpret the world around them. Not just language, but body language, signs, etc., and are trained to interpret the world around them in order to navigate it effectively, but also to make meaning out of it. So semiotics actually is the discipline that studies these things, the signs, the symbols, narratives, and how this means that how something comes to stand for or represent something else. So we all have a common sense way of interpreting and making sense of our world. I can assign this to you and this to me, and then we can build forward from there. So that type of representational thinking, in which imagination plays a significant role, that capacity is there in human beings from a very young age, and which is the reason why we are able to create extremely sophisticated semiotic systems.
Super. Hamsini, we have Divya, Yuvraj, and Quinn. I think they want to make a comment or ask you a question. So,
Yes,
should we get them in?
perfect.
Hey, Hamsini. Hi. I've spoken to you before, but so good to meet you on Menza. So really, really fascinating topic, right? I just wanted to really jump in and ask you about, because the way that you've described semiotics, there is a lot of meaning that therefore the context and culture give to symbols and signs around us, right? So
Yeah.
that I think so relatable to behavior science also, that it's then also a huge study of the context itself, right? Hamsini, or am I?
No, 100%. So when we as semioticians, like when I'm doing interpretation for studies or for projects, we always talk about context, category, and culture. So meaning can exist at all three levels. So it depends on the context itself. So for instance, color interpretation is a function of context. That is where that color you see and in next to what and so on. And then you may go from the context into, okay, do you see color in that particular category or product category in a certain way? And then from there you can go on to what does that color mean in culture itself. So the color white will carry different meanings, or red or orange or any color will carry very different meanings depending upon these three things. So yes, context is very important. So a very cultural example, just recently when that Lionel Messi was the sheikh of the emir of Qatar, he put this black cloak around him as a kind of symbol and a recognition of his achievements, much like in India.
Right.
We,
The
like
shawl,
great
yeah.
singers and whatever, we wrap the shawl around them. They have a similar custom, but they use whatever, and they use black color, which we probably wouldn't. But I was reading some comments, and there was a Twitter thread or some other, my LinkedIn feed, somebody had referred to a Twitter thread, and there were non-Arab people who didn't have any understanding of this custom. They kind of had quite a negative interpretation of this act from this Emir of Qatar. They read it as, in a way, not honoring Messi, but taking away from his personality. Great. So, any other thoughts, comments, questions?
I'm in love with this topic of semiotics because I really like the concept of understanding concept, deriving meaning. Because, as a writer, I think this is the basis of thematic writing as well. And
Yes,
as somebody who works in
100%.
marketing, as somebody who works in marketing, if you want to make behavior, context, all of that, it's so relevant.
Yes,
Personally,
totally.
I first got introduced to this term as a child when I was reading one of those Dan Brown books, and you had
Yes, Dan Brown, yes.
symbology came in, and there was all
Yeah,
fiction,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
I was
yeah.
Googling about it. And from there, I
Yes.
came into what is semiotics. And since then, I've been absolutely in love with this field. I don't know much about the theories or things, but I try to look at things through the perspective of it. So
Yeah.
I'm very interested to actually get to learn things. I'm super excited
Okay.
for this.
Super. So, moving on from this capacity for representational thinking and the study of representation, which is what semiotics actually is. So, in order to accurately interpret and make meaning of the world in which we live, as well as our own experiences, we actually call upon what I am labeling 3 planes of experience. So, plane 1 is the plane of the material object, which has an existence in reality. We can see, touch, smell, experience that material object with our senses. So that is the material plane, which is the starting point for semiotics. But it's actually in plane 2, which is the plane of representation or expression, where the semiotic reality really begins, because that's where you may have drawings, squiggles, colors, or words. So when we name something and we label something, then it acquires that semiotic reality, and that is more conceptual than material. So it does not have material existence the way the object itself does, right? And then plane 3 is actually the plane of content, which is entirely conceptual. So that draws more from imagination than from material reality. So it's all very abstract, but a very practical example. We are all taught that, when you meet elders, you bend down and touch their feet and take their blessing. So that act of bending down is actually a physical act that lies in plane 1. The meaning, when you conceptualize that act as a sign or symbol, then you are actually entering semiotic reality and plane 2. So you're going beyond the physical to the conceptual. And then when you go from there to your thinking about what does that act actually mean, and maybe you might think it's respect. And then from there, you connect it to the concept of blessing. And then you are now saying, okay, this behavior signifies respect and the seeking of blessing. Now, if you saw, let's say, some Chinese or some Western person doing this behavior with their elders, you might actually be a little bit confused, or you might wonder, how did they begin to adopt something which is actually a part of Indian culture, where the behavior and its connected meanings, we have learned it, they have also learned it, and then they have accepted it and see the value in actually that behavior leading to that meaning, right? They are also seeking blessings from elders by bending down and touching their feet, or in some way exhibiting that. So then from the physical you go to the different levels of conceptual realms, let's say. So that's actually the space of semiotic thinking, the interpretation, semiotic reality, call it what you will, shared imaginary. So there are many different ways in which this is described. Even in semiotics, there's a lot of terminology which describes it in different ways. But I hope you understand that difference between the material, the physical, the sensory, what you experience through your senses, and then the interpretation of that through concepts. So that's where the semiotic phenomena, like you may just see that act and not even think about it. When you see the act and you interpret it, so then that act becomes a semiotic phenomena. And that semiotic phenomena is actually a blend of the real, material, and the conceptual imaginary. And that is actually the power of the symbolic. And it's most manifest in cultural representations, how we treat, like Lord Ganesha, and art of, so many artists represent Lord Ganesha in so many different ways. Or, like this, the example I started with these movie stars and the big cutouts that are made of them, and such sort of cultural things. But later on, we'll also come to more cognitive areas where perhaps the overlap between semiotics and behavioral science may be more evident, let's say.
Nice. And Hamsini, sorry to, just a question here. The reason why this is so powerful is one of the reasons is because the brain stores information associatively, right? So it kind of gives meaning It give two facts and figures and experiences, right? That's how it's coded.
Yes.
And that's why semiotics therefore becomes such a powerful tool, right? Is that correct?
Yes, true. Well, I taught a course on advertising research, and in that I also taught part of the sessions on long-term memory and how things are stored in long-term memory. And one memory is semantic memory, and semantic memory actually is associative and connective.
Absolutely.
And that's how we do store things in our brain. That is correct.
Thank you. This is fascinating.
Yes, so in next week's session, we'll dive a little deeper into this aspect of reality and its representation, how we know what we know about the world in which we live. And then from there, I'll move on to talk about, in my understanding, because I haven't studied behavioral science much, so in my commonsensical understanding, interconnection between semiotics proper and behavioral science. And then from there, I'll go on to talk about semiotics and marketing, advertising, branding, and all these sort of areas. I might just do one session only on just looking through symbols and connecting symbols from our everyday life. Even that would be quite fascinating.
Thank you for listening to the Semiotic Eye. Please stay tuned for more episodes of this podcast. And if you want to learn more about semiotics, please go to our website leapfrogstrategy.com and access our learning center to start your semiotic journey. Bye.